The great hall was silent, the kind of silence that made everyone uneasy. The grand event had been going smoothly, with diplomats and military leaders from across the galaxy present. They had gathered to discuss the future of the galaxy, to form alliances that could change everything. The alien queen, a figure of power and grace, stood at the center of it all. Her presence was commanding. Her people respected her beyond words. She had the weight of an entire empire on her shoulders, and yet she wore her crown with dignity. But now, something was wrong. The queen's breathing had become shallow, her body trembling slightly. At first, no one noticed, thinking it was just the stress of the meeting. But then she suddenly staggered and collapsed, her once strong figure crumpling to the floor in front of everyone. A gasp swept through the crowd. The most powerful being in the galaxy was down, and no one understood why. Panic spread like wildfire, though it was kept hidden behind a calm facade. Alien doctors rushed to the queen's side, but they were confused. Nothing about her condition made sense. Her heart was racing too fast, but there was no physical injury. There was no sign of the usual illnesses or blockages that could cause such a sudden attack. The queen's most trusted advisors, people who had worked beside her for years, looked helplessly at the doctors. No one could figure out what was happening. The queen, the symbol of their empire's strength, was dying, and they didn't know why. In the chaos, a message was sent out to Earth. A human medic, someone with no real power but a reputation for quick thinking, was summoned. The Alien Council was desperate. They had no choice but to try something that felt like a gamble. The humans were strange to them, but if this medic could save their queen, it would change everything. The room grew tense as the human arrived, escorted into the hall with a look of confusion. Ethan, a simple medic from Earth, had no idea what he was walking into. He had been told only that the queen was in critical condition, and that his help was needed. His training had taught him how to heal, how to help in any emergency, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Seeing an alien queen, let alone one who held so much power, the moment Ethan entered the chamber, all eyes were on him. The alien doctors, though skilled in their own right, stepped aside to allow him to work. They had no choice. Ethan approached the queen's body, now surrounded by a team of doctors who looked lost. Her skin was pale, her breathing irregular, and her pulse was erratic. Ethan knelt beside her, studying her carefully. He took in her features, sharp angles, smooth skin that was not quite human but not completely alien either. Her heart raced and her pulse was erratic, but there were no obvious signs of injury. He listened to her chest, his mind racing with questions. "What happened to her?" asked, his voice calm but filled with uncertainty. The lead doctor, an alien species that had vast medical knowledge, looked at Ethan with wide eyes. "We don't know. Her condition doesn't match anything we've studied. It's as if her heart simply can't keep up with her body." Ethan frowned. This was something different. "She's not injured, but there's something wrong. Have you tried calming her down? Maybe it's stress." The doctors exchanged puzzled glances. "Stress, but she is a queen. She is made for this life. Everyone has their limits," Ethan said quietly. "Let me try something." He looked around, noticing how tense everyone was. The queen's guards were still standing, looking at him as though he were an outsider, because he was. A human with little to no understanding of the complexity of alien emotions was now the one they hoped would save their queen. Ethan wasn't sure if they were watching him out of hope or skepticism, but it didn't matter. He had to try. Taking a deep breath, Ethan gently placed his hand on the queen's forehead. Her skin was cool, but there was something almost electric in the air. Her breathing was shallow, barely audible. Her heart was still racing. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to feel the pulse of the situation. He couldn't just use medicine. Here, this wasn't an injury that could be patched up with a few stitches. This was something deeper, something that went beyond what he had ever faced before. The alien doctors watched, still unsure of what Ethan was doing, but no one said a word. There was nothing else they could do. Ethan had learned something in his years of practice. Sometimes it wasn't just about the physical. Sometimes It was about understanding what wasn't said, what wasn't seen. The queen's body was strong. There was a weakness in her, something emotional that her people couldn't see. He whispered softly, trying to connect with her. I know you're in pain. Let go for a moment. You can survive this. The alien doctors shifted uneasily as Ethan continued. They had no words to describe what he was doing. It wasn't medical, at least, not in the way they understood it. Minutes passed. The queen's breathing began to stabilize, a slow, almost imperceptible change. Ethan's hand remained on her forehead, the connection between them deepening. He felt her tension, her fears, her sense of loss. It was all there, buried deep beneath her composed exterior. The alien doctors, now watching with growing curiosity, could only stare. They had never seen anything like it. Slowly, the queen's eyes fluttered open. Her gaze was unfocused at first, her mind still clouded. Then, her eyes met Ethan's. There was no fear in them, only confusion. What happened? Her voice was faint, but it carried the weight of command. Ethan looked at her, his voice steady. You're going to be okay. Just take a moment. You've been through something, ... But we're going to fix this. The alien council, who had been standing in the background, stepped forward. They were still unsure of this human's methods, but they had no other choice. The queen's life was in his hands now. The queen looked at Ethan, a silent understanding passing between them. She didn't speak immediately, but there was something in her eyes of recognition. Perhaps she had expected to die, or perhaps she hadn't fully understood what had happened to her. But now, she was alive, and for the first time, it seemed she wasn't alone. The queen lay still, her breathing deeper now, but still slow and uneven. Her eyes fluttered occasionally, and her hands clenched the fabric of her gown as if she were trying to hold on to something. But nothing seemed to anchor her. Ethan remained. By her side, his hands still gently placed on her forehead, trying to calm her with his voice. Her once imperious demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of confusion. Ethan could see the depth of her fatigue, the uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't just physically drained. Something more was weighing heavily on her burden only she knew. The alien doctors, still standing around, exchanged glances there, eyes filled with disbelief. They had watched their queen fall, helpless against her own body, and now this human had somehow managed to stop the worst of it. They had never seen anything like it before, this human who had never encountered. Their kind was the reason their queen had stabilized. And yet, there was something deeply unsettling about it. Was it truly just medicine? Or was there something more to this? Why are you doing this? The queen's voice, though weak, finally broke the silence. She looked directly at Ethan, the question lingering in the air. I do not understand. Why would you, a human, risk everything to help me? Ethan met her gaze, his voice calm, reassuring. I believe that everyone deserves help when they need it, no matter who they are. He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I've seen what pain can do to people, even to someone like you. I didn't come here to take anything from you. I just want to help you heal. The queen's eyes searched his face as if trying to make sense of his words. She was used to power, to command, to control every aspect of her life. Yet here, in this vulnerable moment, she felt powerless. And this human was the one who had the power to save her. Her gaze softened, but only for a moment. A deep sadness filled her eyes, something beyond physical weakness. Ethan noticed it, and for a brief second, he saw a different side of the queen, a leader who wasn't unbreakable, who wasn't immune to the struggles of being in charge. The queen took a slow, deep breath. You've never seen a ruler like me. I carry the weight of an empire on my shoulders, and yet I feel weak. Her voice trembled slightly. Do you know what it's like to carry the expectations of an entire galaxy? To know that every decision you make will affect millions? Ethan didn't answer right away. He simply nodded, understanding that she was speaking from a place of exhaustion and fear. I can't imagine what it must be like, he said quietly. But no one can carry that weight alone. Even the strongest need help. Her eyes flickered as she processed his words, and for the first time since he had arrived, she seemed to relax slightly. The sharp tension in her face softened, and her shoulders lowered from their rigid stance. The lead alien doctor, who had been watching the conversation carefully, stepped forward cautiously. "We still do not understand what caused this collapse, human. You say it is stress, but our research into your species has shown that you humans handle emotional distress differently. What could have caused her heart to fail?" Ethan turned his attention to the doctor, who was clearly struggling to grasp the concept of emotional stress as a physical ailment. Stress is more than just a feeling. It can manifest in the body in ways you don't expect. In humans, it can cause heart problems, blood pressure spikes, even fainting or heart attacks. But it's not always physical. Sometimes it's the mind that breaks first. The body follows. The alien doctor appeared puzzled. "So you believe her heart failed because of emotional pain?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. And I believe it's something much deeper than physical exhaustion. Something inside her mind and heart." The Queen's eyes narrowed, her expression becoming guarded again. "I don't believe you know what you were talking about. I have led armies, built alliances, ruled over worlds. What could a human possibly know about the pain I've suffered?" Ethan understood the Queen's pride, but he didn't back down. "I don't know everything, Your Highness, but I do know that emotional wounds can be just as dangerous as physical ones, maybe even more dangerous." The Queen looked away, her face tight with something he couldn't quite read. There was anger there, but also something else, something more vulnerable. She looked like she was about to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, she closed her eyes and sighed deeply, as if the weight of her own thoughts were too much to bear. For a moment, the room fell silent. The alien doctors stood in place, unsure of how to proceed. They had never encountered a queen who was so human. Then, unexpectedly, the Queen spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I have lost everything. My closest allies have turned against me. I trusted them, but they betrayed me. And now I am left alone." Ethan could feel the shift in the air. The Queen, the most powerful being in the galaxy, was revealing something she had kept hidden for a long time. She wasn't just a ruler. She was a person, just like anyone else. She had feelings, fears, and doubts. For the first time, she allowed herself to show them. "You're not alone," Ethan said softly, his voice steady and kind. "I'm here to help you." Her eyes met his again, this time with a different look, one of understanding, but also of acceptance. The Queen was still strong, still proud, but in that moment, she allowed herself to be vulnerable. The alien doctors exchanged uncertain looks as they continued to watch the exchange between their Queen and the human medic. They had never seen their Queen like this. She was a symbol of power, of control. But now, she was something different. A person, fragile and human in a way they could not yet comprehend. The Queen took another breath. Slowly, her chest rising and falling with each movement. She was beginning to feel lighter, less burdened, and for the first time in what felt like ages, she felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way out of the darkness that had clouded her heart for so long. Maybe Ethan, the human medic, could help her heal. Not just physically, but emotionally. The Queen finally allowed herself to close her eyes again, this time in a gesture of surrender. She trusted Ethan, and in that moment, she understood something she had never fully grasped. Before, sometimes, it wasn't the strength of your power that saved you. Sometimes, it was the strength of others. The Queen's condition improved slowly, and Ethan remained by her side, never leaving her alone. Each day, her breathing became steadier, and her pulse less erratic. The alien doctors were still baffled by what Ethan had done, but they could see the Queen growing stronger. There was something about the human medic's calm presence that seemed to help, though they couldn't explain why. Ethan continued to monitor the Queen's health, adjusting his methods when needed. But his role had become more than just a healer. The more time he spent with the Queen, the more he understood her. Her physical recovery was slow, but the real challenge was far deeper than that. One evening, the Queen appeared stronger. Ethan spoke gently. "How are you feeling today?" She looked at him, her dark eyes full of thought. "I feel better, but I don't understand what happened to me. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, something hidden beneath her calm exterior. I have never felt this way before. I have always been in control, but now I am lost. Ethan nodded. Sometimes even the strongest people can lose control, especially when they carry so much weight. You don't have to carry it all alone. You've been carrying it for so long. Maybe it's time to let go, even just a little. Quiet for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Ethan knew that she wasn't used to vulnerability, especially not in front of anyone. She was a queen, a leader, someone who was supposed to be invincible. But she wasn't invincible, and Ethan wasn't here to make her feel weak. He was here to help her heal in every way possible. I have trusted the wrong people, the queen said at last, her voice quiet but full of pain. I have surrounded myself with those I thought were loyal. But in the end, they betrayed me. They took advantage of my trust, and now everything is falling apart. Ethan could hear the sadness in her words. She had been betrayed not by an enemy, but by those closest to her, and that pain ran deep. He didn't have the answers to make her feel better, but he knew one thing. She needed someone who would listen. Someone who wouldn't judge her or try to fix everything all at once. You don't have to face this alone, Ethan said softly. It's okay to trust again. It might take time, but you're not alone. The queen's gaze met his, and for the first time since he had arrived, she seemed to soften just a little. And you, human? Do you trust me? Her question wasn't harsh, but there was a hint of uncertainty behind it. Ethan thought about her question. He had come here to help, but the queen had done something for him too. She had shown him a side of leadership he had never understood. Her strength wasn't just in her power. It was in her ability to endure, to keep fighting even. When the world seemed against her, I trust that you want to get better, he replied simply. I trust that you'll do what it takes to heal. I'll be here every step of the way. The queen didn't say anything in response. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the silence linger between them. For a moment, Ethan thought she might not speak again. But then she spoke in a low voice. You remind me of something I once knew, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before I became queen, before the weight of the empire fell upon me, I was different. I was not so burdened. But I lost that part of myself, and now I don't know how to find it again. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He could sense that she was opening up to him, but she wasn't ready to share everything. And that was okay. Healing wasn't something that could be rushed. It took time. You don't have to find it alone, he said after a long pause. Maybe you don't need to go back to who you were before. Maybe you just need to move forward and find a new way to be. The queen turned her head slightly, her eyes still closed. There was a moment of quiet reflection before she finally nodded. I will try, she said, her voice firmer now, though still laced with uncertainty. For the first time, I will try to move forward. Ethan gave her a small, encouraging smile. That's all anyone can do. As the days passed, the queen's health continued to improve. She began to regain some of her strength, and although her body was healing, the emotional scars she carried would take longer to mend. But with Ethan's support, she started to open up more, slowly letting go of the anger and distrust that had held her captive for so long. One afternoon, as the queen sat by a large window overlooking the palace gardens, Ethan joined her. The sunlight was soft, casting long shadows across the room. For a moment, the two of them sat in silence, both lost in their thoughts. Do you know? The queen began, her voice distant. When I first took the throne, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to live up to the legacy of those who came before me. I feared that I would fail, yet I pushed those fears down. I buried them beneath the demands of leadership. Ethan listened, his gaze steady on her. That fear never really goes away, does it? He asked softly. No, the queen replied, her voice heavy with the weight of truth. But it doesn't have to control you either. Ethan smiled, impressed by her growing self-awareness. It was a slow process, but she was changing, learning, and beginning to heal. The queen wasn't the same person she had been when he first arrived. You're doing well, Ethan said simply. She nodded, looking out over the gardens, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Maybe you're right. Maybe one step is all it takes to begin. As the days passed into weeks, the Queen's trust in Ethan grew. She began to make decisions not from a place of fear or anger, but from a place of clarity. She was still learning to let go of the past, but she was no longer carrying it alone. Ethan had helped her face the darkest parts of herself, and now, together, they were building something new. The days had passed, and the Queen's strength continued to grow. Her once fragile body was becoming steady, and the faint traces of worry on her face were starting to fade. The alien doctors, though still skeptical of Ethan's methods, had to admit that the Queen was improving in ways they couldn't explain. They had tried everything within their knowledge to heal her, but it was the human medic who had made the real difference. The Queen was walking now, though with a slow and cautious pace, but each step felt like progress. Ethan had been with her every day, offering advice and calm support. It wasn't just about the physical recovery anymore. The Queen had begun to open up more, sharing her thoughts and doubts. It wasn't just her healer now. It had become someone she could talk to, someone she could trust. It was a bond neither of them had expected to form, but it was undeniable. One afternoon, while walking through the palace gardens, the Queen turned to Ethan with a question. Her voice was still careful, as if she was choosing her words with great care. "Do you ever question your place in the universe, human?" she asked. Ethan stopped walking, looking at her curiously. "What do you mean?" The Queen's gaze drifted toward the sky, her eyes clouded with thought. "When I first became Queen, I had a clear sense of purpose. I knew my place. I knew what I had to do. But now, I feel lost. I don't know what my role is anymore." Ethan understood the weight of her words. She had been a queen, a ruler, the very heart of her empire. But now she was questioning everything she had known. It was hard to let go of the past, especially when it had defined who you were for so long. "Maybe," he said slowly, "it's not about knowing your place right now. Maybe it's about finding what matters to you now. What do you want? Not as a queen, but as a person." The Queen looked at him, her expression thoughtful. She had never been asked that before. Everything in her life had been about duty, about responsibility. But now, in this quiet moment, she was allowed to consider a different path. "I want peace," she said quietly. "I want to feel like I am not just carrying the weight of an entire empire. I want to be free from the expectations that have bound me for so long." Ethan smiled gently, recognizing the sincerity in her voice. "That's a start," he said. "Finding peace begins with accepting that you don't have to carry everything by yourself. You've been a leader for so long that it's hard to see any other way. But there's more to life than power and control." The Queen paused, considering his words. "I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be anything other than what I've always been." "Start small," Ethan suggested. "Take it one day at a time. Start with what you can control right now, and let go of the rest." The Queen's gaze softened, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax. There was something in Ethan's words that resonated deeply with her. It wasn't just about recovering from her heart attack. It was about recovering from everything that had weighed on her heart for years. In the days that followed, the Queen became more open to the idea of letting go. She allowed herself to rest more, to make time for herself outside of the duties of the crown. Slowly, she began to embrace the idea that she could be more than just a ruler. She could be a person too. One evening, after a long day of quiet reflection, the Queen invited Ethan to sit with her in her private chambers. The room was quiet, the only sound being the soft rustle of the curtains as the wind blew through the open windows. The Queen had not spoken much that day, but now she seemed ready to share something she had been holding inside. "I have spent so many years hiding from the truth," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion.
Wow.
"I thought that if I showed weakness, I would lose everything. I thought that if I allowed myself to feel, I would be seen as unfit to lead." Ethan sat across from her, listening quietly. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle she had faced for so long. It wasn't just the physical burden of leadership that had weighed her down. It was the emotional toll of always having to be perfect, always having to be strong. But you don't have to hide anymore, he said. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. Your people don't need perfection. They need someone who can understand them, someone who is real. The queen looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and sorrow in her gaze. I'm afraid, she admitted. Afraid that I will never be able to be the leader I once was. Afraid that if I let go, everything will fall apart. Ethan nodded, understanding her fear. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to let go. You've done your part. You've led your people with strength and wisdom. But now it's time to lead in a different way. One that includes yourself, not just the empire. The queen's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her emotions. She wasn't just a queen. She was a person with hopes, fears, and dreams. And that was okay. Double quotes, thank you, Ethan, she whispered. You've given me something I thought I had lost forever. You've given me the chance to find myself again. Smiled softly. You don't need to thank me. You've always had the strength inside you. You just needed someone to remind you of it. The queen smiled back, a small but genuine smile. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone anymore, and she didn't have to carry the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. She could finally begin to heal, not just as a queen, but as a person. As the evening went on, the two of them sat together in silence, the weight of the past slowly lifting from the queen's shoulders. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to face it, whatever it might bring. The queen had made incredible progress over the past few weeks. Her health was almost fully restored, and the emotional strain that had plagued her for so long was beginning to ease. It wasn't just the physical recovery that mattered anymore. It was the mental and emotional healing that was the true test. Ethan had been by her side through it all. He had taught her to embrace vulnerability, to trust others, and to let go of the burdens that had weighed her down. Though their journey was far from over, the queen was stronger now than she had ever been. One day, as the queen walked through the palace gardens, taking in the warm sunlight, she noticed how much the world seemed to have changed. Everything. Around her, the flowers, the trees, the sky seemed brighter, more vibrant. It was as if she were seeing the universe with new eyes. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Ethan joined her, walking silently beside her, both of them, content to enjoy the peace of the moment. How are you feeling today? Ethan asked, breaking the silence. The queen smiled softly, her eyes focused on the garden ahead. I feel lighter, she said. I've spent so long focusing on the empire, on being a perfect leader. But now I realize that perfection is a myth. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be real. Ethan nodded. It's exactly it. You've carried the weight of your people for so long, but now you're learning to carry it with balance. That makes all the difference. The queen turned to him, a grateful look in her eyes. You've been a big part of that. You've helped me see that I can't do everything alone. You've helped me realize that even a queen needs support. Ethan smiled warmly. We all need support, even if we don't always admit it. As they continued their walk, the queen's thoughts drifted back to her people, the empire she had ruled for so many years. She had been so focused on leading them, making decisions for them, that she had forgotten what it meant to truly connect with them as individuals. I've spent so much time commanding others, telling them what to do, that I never took the time to listen, the queen said softly. I see now that true leadership isn't about control. It's about understanding. It's about listening to the needs of your people, not just commanding them to follow orders. Ethan listened carefully, sensing the depth of her reflection. It takes great strength to admit that. Most leaders are too proud to acknowledge their flaws, but you're doing it. And that makes you a stronger leader than you've ever been. Queen nodded, but there was still a hint of uncertainty in her expression. But how do I rebuild the trust I lost? How do I make up for all the mistakes I've made? Ethan stopped walking and looked at her with understanding. You don't need to fix everything all at once. Start by being honest with your people. Tell them what you've learned. Tell them that you've made mistakes, but that you're willing to change. They'll respect you more for it than if you try to pretend you have all the answers." The queen took a deep breath, considering his words. She had always been the embodiment of strength, of unwavering leadership. But now she was learning that true strength came from embracing her humanity, from being open and vulnerable. It was a difficult lesson, but one she was beginning to understand. "I think I'm ready," she said after a long pause. "I'm ready to take the next step." Ethan smiled. "That's all anyone can ask for. We all have to start somewhere." The queen and Ethan made their way back to the palace, where the queen called for a meeting with her council. She knew that the time had come to face the truth and share her journey with them. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had learned that the greatest strength came from within, from allowing herself to be vulnerable and authentic. As she stood before her council, the room fell silent. The alien leaders, who had once seen her as an unshakable force, now looked at her with curiosity, some even with a hint of respect. The queen took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I have called you here today to speak with you not as your queen, but as a person. I've made many mistakes during my reign. I have tried to control everything, to bear the weight of the empire alone, but I see now that I cannot do this without you. I have been hiding my fears, my doubts, and my pain. But no more. I want to be the leader you deserve, a leader who listens, who understands, and who grows with you." The council members exchanged looks, some of them surprised, others nodding in understanding. The queen continued, her words flowing with sincerity. "Know that I have lost your trust, but I am asking for a chance to rebuild it. I can't promise that everything will be perfect, but I can promise that I will be real with you. I will lead with honesty, with compassion, and with the strength that comes from being open to change." There was a long silence after she finished speaking, and for a moment the queen feared that her words hadn't been enough. But then, one by one, the council members stood up, their faces reflecting understanding and, in some cases, admiration. The lead counselor stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with respect. "Your honesty is rare, Queen. We have seen you as a symbol of power, but today we see you as a leader who is willing to grow. We respect that. We trust that together we can move forward." A sense of relief washed over the queen as she realized that the first step toward rebuilding her empire had begun. It wasn't about regaining control. It was about building something new, something stronger, together. As the meeting ended, the queen felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be a leader. It wasn't about perfection. It was about understanding, about being honest, about taking responsibility for the past while looking forward to the future. Ethan had shown her the path, and now it was up to her to walk it. With his help, she had healed in ways she'd never thought possible, and as she looked ahead, she knew that the future of her empire and of herself was in her hands. The days following the council meeting were a turning point for the queen. The words she had shared had not only affected the council, but it also rippled through her people. They were beginning to see her differently, not as an unshakable figurehead, but as a leader who understood their struggles, a leader who, like them, had vulnerabilities and fears. Ethan remained by her side, quietly supporting her as she adjusted to her new role. She was no longer the distant ruler she had once been. She had allowed herself to connect with her people. That had made all the difference. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the queen stood on the balcony of her private quarters, looking out over the city below. The lights of the city flickered on, casting a soft glow across the landscape. It was peaceful, almost calming, and for the first time in a long while, the queen felt a sense of quiet contentment. She wasn't trying to control everything anymore. She was allowing herself to be part of the world around her. Ethan joined her on the balcony, his footsteps quiet against the stone floor. He could see the change in her, the way she carried herself now with more confidence, more warmth. It was a side of her that had been hidden for so long, but it was finally shining through. "Beautiful, isn't it?" the queen said softly, her gaze still fixed on the city. Ethan nodded. "It is. I think you've helped make it more beautiful." She turned to him, her expression soft. I'm not sure I've done anything special. I've just started listening. But there's still so much work to do, Ethan smiled, seeing the modesty in her words. The fact that you've opened up to your people means more than you think. That's something not many leaders can do. The Queen sighed, the weight of her responsibilities still hanging over her. I've made many mistakes, Ethan. The years I spent building this empire, I thought I had everything under control. But the truth is, I was too focused on power, on ruling. I ignored the very people I swore to protect. Now I see how much I've lost because of that. Ethan stepped closer, his voice gentle. It's not too late. You're already on the right path. What matters now is what you do next. The Queen looked at him, a quiet resolve forming in her eyes. You're right. Can't undo the past, but I can make a difference now. I can lead in a way that truly matters. Ethan nodded, sensing that the Queen had reached a deeper understanding of her role as a leader. It wasn't just about making decisions for the Empire, it was about connecting with her people, understanding their needs and supporting them. Just as they supported her, the Queen turned back to the city, her thoughts focused. I will rebuild what I've broken. I will rebuild their trust, their faith in me. It won't be easy, but I'm willing to do the work. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring touch. You don't have to do it alone. You have the strength, and you've already shown your people that you're capable of change. They'll follow you, not because of your power, but because of your willingness to grow. A soft breeze blew through the air, and for a moment the Queen allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. It wasn't the peace of a ruler who had everything under control. It was the peace of someone who had learned to let go of the past, to embrace change, and to accept help from others. I don't know what the future holds, the Queen said quietly, her voice full of hope, but I know that I can face it, and that makes all the difference. Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with pride. Ready? You're more than ready. As the weeks passed, the Queen continued her work, rebuilding the relationships she had once taken for granted. She spent more time in the palace gardens, meeting with her people, listening to their concerns, and offering support. She didn't have all the answers, but she was willing to learn from them. Ethan, though no longer her constant presence, remained a trusted advisor. The Queen had come to value his perspective, his calmness in the face of adversity, and his willingness to stand by her side when the world seemed uncertain. One day the Queen called for a gathering in the main hall of the palace. She stood before her people, no longer the distant, untouchable figure she had once been, but someone who had shared her struggles with them, who had opened her heart. I stand before you today, she began, her voice steady and strong, not as a queen, but as one of you. I have made mistakes, and I have caused harm in my efforts to protect this empire. But I promise you that I will do better. I will listen, I will learn, and together we will rebuild. We will not just be an empire, we will be a community. The room was quiet as the Queen's words settled over the crowd. For a long moment, no one spoke. But then slowly, people began to rise, one by one, in quiet recognition. The Queen's honesty, her willingness to admit her flaws, had earned their respect. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real. As the meeting concluded, the Queen walked among her people, exchanging words, listening to their thoughts. She didn't try to control them or tell them what to do. She simply walked beside them, as a leader should. Ethan watched from a distance, a sense of pride filling him as he saw the Queen interacting with her people. She had come a long way, and she was still growing, still learning. And that, he knew, was the true mark of a leader. The Queen had healed, and now she was healing her empire. She had found the balance she had once thought impossible, and she had done it by embracing her humanity. She was no longer just a ruler. She was someone who understood the value of trust, of vulnerability, and of growth. And as she looked out over the horizon, she knew that the future held endless possibilities. The empire was strong, yes, but it was stronger because its queen had learned to lead with heart.